The market has definitely changed. Things have changed. The Royal Commission's around.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get some inside information from people like yourself about what you're hearing from the banks and how the new market is going to be, because it's really going to be a new market. It's going to be a lot different to what it was 12 months ago.
Yeah.
What's kind of the things that you've found out that are going to be helpful for me when I'm sitting down talking with clients that are thinking about making a life-changing decision to sell a home or buy a new home or invest or whatever the case may be?
Yeah,
some of the lessons?
Yeah. Well, I think you've picked up on the key things straight off the bat. It is a completely different environment now to what it was 6 to 12 months ago. And I mean completely different. So in the old days, someone would come to you, they'd see a property they like, they'd make an offer, then they'd go to their bank, 9 times out of 10, they get a home loan, job's done.
Yep.
Now, because of the changes that have flowed through from the Royal Banking Commission and a whole bunch of other government initiatives that are looking at tightening the lending environment, then you're going to get in strife if you go down that road. So there's some very simple things that people need to do now to prepare themselves to put themselves in a position to make an offer. And the first one is, don't go to your bank. Go to a good finance broker who's got access to the entire market.
Now, I know you're kind of invested in this because you own
Of course, I've got a conflict of interest almost in saying that, but in terms of a buyer or a seller's interests, because sellers are looking at doing something, the key is to make sure you've got access to every opportunity, not just the one that a single bank's likely to offer you. And what we've seen in recent times, Scott, is that the major banks in particular, who are really under the microscope with the crosshairs on them from the Royal Banking Commission, have really tightened up. But there's 36 other lenders out there that aren't under the same level of scrutiny. They fall outside that legislation.
And to a point too, they've built business models based on the bits the banks don't cover.
Spot on.
So as your journey through life goes and you start with a journey with one particular financial institution because it suits your needs at the time, as you travel through life and through life's rises and falls, other things are going to suit you better at certain times. And to have someone on board, and I've seen this on a day-to-day basis where I almost know when someone puts in an offer and on their offer form they write a particular financial institution, and based on the information I've got from them through the process of putting in that offer and showing them the property and all that sort of stuff, I know that they're already not going to be a match with that financial institution.
Of course.
Therefore, you know, it's always a case where I'm going, I really think it'd be in your best interest to speak to a broker.
A good broker will get a better deal with your bank. That's 100%. The key thing. That's the first thing. But not only that, you then access 39 other banks, and if they can demonstrate on an apples for apples basis that there's a better deal there for you, why wouldn't you look at it? You don't have to take it, but at least open your eyes to the opportunity.
And just the interaction will probably save you money anyway.
Totally. Absolutely right. Just by going down that road. I guess the thing that we both believe in pretty strongly is that property is an elite team sport. So you need to have the best specialists in each and every position in your property team to be able to achieve the best results. And it's a bit like, if I need brain surgery, I'm not going to go to Bunnings, grab a drill, some methite and some cotton wool and have a crack at it in front of the mirror at home. I'm not going to do that. But most property people do exactly that. Because they don't trust anyone, they think they can do it themselves. So they waste weekends strolling through the paper and realestate.com. They go and make an offer for property that they see, regardless of who the agent happens to be. And then when the wheels fall off because they either can't get the money or it's costing them too much, or 2 years down the track they haven't structured the right way and it's burning a massive hole in their pocket, not a good result. Employ good people around you, make sure they're all independent so they're keeping each other honest. Then all of a sudden you've got people who are really good at that particular area, looking after your interests and kicking goals based on your game strategy.
I see so many people that could have achieved what they want to do and don't, purely on the people they choose to work with.
Totally.
And a lot of that is bury their head in the sand, think I've got to sell, don't really do any research, get to that point where they have to sell and go, all right, where's an agent? And of course at that point, they haven't had time to analyse and build a relationship with and get to know someone to the point that they need to in order to be able to do that transaction for them. And therefore when things go wrong they go, well, why'd that happen? Because realistically all they're doing was this, they're hoping it was going to be okay.
Well, the biggest mistake I think a lot of potential sellers and buyers make in relation to the agent selection is they go for the lowest commission, and in combination with that, the agent that tells them the highest price they're going to get when they rock up. Now, if people can't see through that they're putting themselves in a pretty dangerous position. Because for me, if I've got an agent, if you come to me, Scott, and said, okay, I'm interested in getting you to sell my property, and the first thing you did was drop your pants on your commission, I'd be going, I don't want this guy because he can't negotiate. If you came in and said, well, this is what we charge because, and here's the proven results, and this is what we've done, and we sell them consistently at the right price in a short amount of time, well, I'm quite happy to pay another % more to you because you're going to get me a much better result.
Absolutely. I guess from my perspective in that, I believe when I'm selling someone's property that I have a responsibility that if I can't build more value in there, so if I'm charging someone X amount of dollars, whether it's $10,000 total up, I should be worth 15 to them, or 20 to them, or 30 to them. Because employing me should be actually putting them in a better financial position, not a worse one.
Yeah, good call.
And so if that's my philosophy and that's what I want to deliver on, then that keeps me really accountable as to the results and the work that we're doing throughout the journey and the process and the experience they're getting. They shouldn't have to worry because they should know there is a plan, that we're out there accessing the best buyers, and this is one of the things that I'm most passionate about, is the best buyers don't often see your property. Even though realestate.com is the best thing since sliced bread, it's a great website, it has heaps of attention from buyers, it doesn't always necessarily put the right buyer to your property. So having someone who knows what the target market is and a plan to attract the right buyer who's going to pay the most amount of money for your property to your house is the skill in real estate.
Totally agree.
And I feel if you're selecting an agent on commission basis or cost basis only, then more than likely you're cutting out those tools they need to find those buyers that are going to pay that 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 more than what the other standard buyers that are actually seeing your property on realestate.com, the normal buyers that have seen every property, that know what they should pay for it, or have seen what things are sold for. And of course, when we take some buyers out of the market with this stuff that's going on in the market at the moment, and less competition, it's going to be even harder again to get that premium price.
I don't think that there's ever been a more important time to make sure you've got the right agent on your side, whether it's from the buying side or the selling side, by the way, because from the selling side, you need an agent who has access to qualified buyers, and I emphasise the word qualified, because as we've mentioned already, if someone isn't already pre-approved for their finance, there's a fair chance that their expectations are going to exceed their capability.
And qualified buyers is a really interesting key, because ultimately a good agent should be able to qualify a buyer in about 5 minutes flat.
Yes.
So for me, experience is one of the key things you should be looking for in who you choose to sell your home.
That's right.
I guess we're talking a little bit about the conditions and the changes. Obviously some of the things that have happened recently, because this has been building up a while. Like the Royal Commission just didn't happen yesterday.
It's been 2 years in the making, mate.
2 years in the making. But there's been some changes the government have done, because when we go back to probably the first change was a change in depreciation. In basically the federal government overnight coming out and cancelling depreciation for any second-hand housing. So if you bought something that was older, that you hadn't done renovations or hadn't built, then you were no longer entitled to depreciation.
On fixtures and fittings, spot on.
Which changed buying a property for an investor.
From the holding cost perspective, a fundamental difference. It's added a couple of $100 a week to holding a property long term. That's the impact.
A couple $100 a week, just in depreciation. So that takes a percentage of the market out, doesn't it? By just getting rid of depreciation. When you're looking at, most of the homes that we sell, probably 95% of them are not brand new. So therefore, that changes the number of buyers that are going to be interested in anything that's not brand new straight away.
Big time it is.
So that's the depreciation side. I guess what was the next change?
The next change is more around the finance aspect. So what we've seen in recent times, and it's through APRA, it's through ASIC, and now it's through the Royal Banking Commission, is this focus on responsible lending. And responsible lending has had a number of impacts. Initially, the investors were villainised because they're a convenient donkey to pin the tail on, because it's easy to hate investors because they're making too much money. But what we've seen as a result of the Royal Banking Commission now...
Because the government kind of thought that investors were buying all these properties and competing against first-home buyers, which is making housing unaffordable for first-home buyers, or stopping young families buying the family home that they actually should be buying.
In Sydney, by
Sydney.
the way, in Sydney.
Yeah.
So we've got this myopic view of what's happening in property, all built around the fact that the media, the politicians, the banks all live in Sydney. And surprise, surprise, the first home buyers only represent 10% of the buyers market. So why would we be making policy to represent 10% of the buyers market? I could wax lyrical about this and I get pretty frustrated.
We're not going to get into politics, are we?
No, we're not going to get into politics. Right. Only to say, the only thing I would say is if you have an interest in preserving the ongoing growth and value of your property, I'm apolitical. I have no political allegiance, but I've done enough research around the potential impacts of a federal Labor government changing negative gearing and
some of their
capital
policies.
Yeah, so they're not looking at instituting this until at least 2020.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of years before this is likely to have an impact. But there's a lot smarter people than me from Riskwise, a whole bunch of independent research houses that are predicting that those changes won't only affect investors, they'll affect every property owner to the tune of between 6 to 10%, which will effectively wipe $600 billion off the value of residential property across the country.
So let's put that in context. If say let's take the easy round figure of 10%. So if 10% came off the value of every single property in Australia, to the tune of $6 billion or whatever the case may be.
600 billion.
600 billion, sorry.
Yep.
Let's break that down for everyday Australians, because anyone that's bought a property over the last 8 years in South Australia hasn't seen a lot of capital growth.
No.
It would probably be less than 10%.
Yeah, we've averaged about 4.5% per year in Adelaide over the last 5 years.
And let me quantify that, because that's if you bought well.
Yes.
So if you bought at market value or less, but if you got in a situation where you're in competition and you may have paid 6 or 8% over the top, which means you actually, the value was here, but you paid that because you wanted that house.
Yeah, they're right.
So therefore, you then had to do a year to catch up, year and a half. So 2 years you just kind of caught up, because then you got stamp duty on top, so that takes another year.
Yeah.
So now, of course, you're 3 years down before you're even somewhere close. And let's say you can't just throw a blanket across the market, because every single house is different, every single situation is different, every single suburb is different.
There is no property market, it's a collection of houses.
Especially when talking those little fine margins.
Yes.
You know, there's no guarantee that you say, oh, everything's, you know, people called me about, there was a story on TV the other night, and it said that Adelaide had gone up, 3.5% in the last 12 months. Well, that's great. That's right across Adelaide.
Median.
Median. So if the eastern suburbs, which have got values way higher than down south, went up 2%, then obviously that's going to be a big part of what happened in South.
There are precincts around Adelaide that have gone up 18 to 20% over the last couple of years.
Yeah. And a lot of that information too is based on what has sold in that 12 months.
That's right.
If you get 2 or 3 really big sales that happen in that 12 months in that suburb, it's going to distort those figures.
Yeah.
So it's I feel that when we're talking little tiny figures, when we're talking little small gains and little small losses and that sort of stuff, it really means we're about even overall. Yeah. So it's really dangerous to go, hey, we're really proactive about that, or we've made lots of money, because then when your expectations when you go to sell is you go, well, we went up 4.5%, so therefore I get my calculator out, I'm paid 450,000, so therefore mine's got to be worth X.
Yeah.
And that's where it can get quite dangerous.
Absolutely right. Well, the old analogy I like to use is you might have all the bells and whistles in your house. Let's say it's a 4-bedroom home, and it's got a swimming pool, and it's got it's got the granite bench tops and all the rest, and you've got a similar profile property. It's got the same stuff but at a lesser value down the road. Just because you've spent an extra 200,000 on your place doesn't mean it's worth 200,000 more. If you buy I used to use the analogy of a Holden. If you buy a Statesman versus a Commodore, people value the Commodore, and that's what they're going to pay for the Statesman, because it's got all the same stuff. It's just a little bit brighter and a bit shinier and a bit flasher.
Yep, 100%. So obviously with those changes now, moving forward, Royal Commission's finished. The report comes out in February.
Yeah.
I really think this is an interesting time that we've got to have conversations with everyone that owns a home or anyone that's thinking about transacting. Of course, I meet them every day. What sort of things do I need to make them aware of that is going to happen once that report's released, that the banks are going to be concentrating on doing?
Yeah, they're already in place, so we don't see too many more new policy restrictions, but the ones that have just come into play are going to have a fairly meaningful impact. And I could wax lyrical about the nitty-gritties, but the bottom line, the take-home message for everyone needs to be, get a pre-approval before you start looking at property.
Yep.
Because you won't know what you can afford until you've actually gone through that conversation. Because the major impacts that with
because this is back to the responsible lending stuff.
It is back to responsible lending. So what's happened is, up until a few months ago, all the banks would benchmark what your living expenses were. So they'd look at what your monthly expenses were and they'd say, right, the average is this, so we'll use that for the basis of servicing the loan.
So they had basically a scale, a dollar amount per month that your cost of living was for a married couple with 2 kids living in Morphett Vale.
That's it.
They would go, your living expenses are $1,650 a month.
Spot on.
And now
they're going to say, right, give me your last 6 months statements.
Yep.
We're going to look at your actual expenditure on each of these line items. Yep. And if you've had a wow of a time at Christmas and gone for a holiday and spent up big with the family, yep, that's going to have a direct impact on how much the bank's going to let you borrow.
Because they will average out your spending over those 6 months and go, well, that is your...
That's your actual.
Yep.
It's not the average, it's not the benchmark, that's the actual.
So someone who has expenditures on their Visa card, and because everything is electronic, so if they've got sports bet withdrawals,
yeah,
if they've got afterpay withdrawals, if they've got all of these other things that just seem easy, like you're catching an Uber home from the city once a week,
yep,
all those sorts of things, you're getting Uber Eats
you got it,
twice a week,
yep,
all those types of that become habits,
yep,
that are really easy to do and really easy traps to fall into these days.
Yep.
The bank is now, they have to go, well, this is a habit, it's obviously consistent with your statements, it's not a once off a month.
It's not an estimate, it's there for everyone to see. So the take homes for people need to be control your expenses.
Yep.
Make sure your conduct is absolutely squeaky. And what I mean by that is if you've got 1 cent outstanding on a repayment,
yep,
then for some banks that's a knockout punch.
Yep.
If you're late by a day in making your home loan repayment, kiss buying a home for 6 months. If your credit card limits are too high, they've just increased the buffers they're putting on personal loans and credit cards, which is going to again reduce how much you can effectively borrow.
Because even though you've got a $5,000 credit card, even if you've got zero balance on it, you're still judged for having $5,000 credit.
Spot on. You can go out and max it out to $5,000 tomorrow.
Like
that's exactly what the banks think.
Yep. Yep. And now they're actually, if you've got a $5,000 credit card, they're actually going to assume that it's like $7,000 or $7,500.
Yeah, it's simple maths. If you had a $3,000 credit card, with the recent changes to buffering, they're treating that like a $4,000 credit card. There's a 25% increase that they've introduced overnight.
That's going to be big.
It's massive. So the net effect for, depending on your position, so depending on your income and depending on your liabilities, the average punter or the average purchaser or homeowner like myself is going to have somewhere between 20 and 40% wiped off their borrowing capacity. Yep. And people don't know. This is a silent but deadly exercise, because it's not until you front up to buy a property that you even know that exists at the moment.
Yep.
So I just reinforce the need for anyone who has an interest in property. The first thing you do is get a pre-approval, whether you go to your own bank or you go to a really good finance broker. Get it, because you will know then exactly how much you can afford to spend on a property before you start talking to yourself or going through realestate.com.
Absolutely. I think a term that's really going to be bandied around a lot this year is the term buyer's market. Now, I hate the term buyer's market. I think it's the most...
Yeah.
It's the worst term you possibly think, because I think what the public perceives that term as is it's a shit time to sell.
Yeah.
Now, in my opinion, in this particular market that we're going to go into, where there's a few less buyers, there's more homes on the market, it's a great opportunity for people to be able to find the home that they need at a better price with less competition, which means it's going to be a lot easier transaction for them.
Yep, totally.
Now, if you've got good jobs, good incomes, good spending habits by the sounds of it,
clean conduct,
clean conduct, then getting yourself in a position to be able to transact in these coming months is going to be the best financial decision you ever made in your life.
Absolutely is. I love times like this. It's the best time to be looking at property from my perspective, and I'm a little bit of a Buffett believer in that.
Warren Buffett.
Yeah, when Warren Buffett, who's arguably the greatest investor in the world, he is famous for saying that, be fearful when people are being greedy, but be greedy when people are being fearful. Well, the mainstream media is filling our heads with fear right now. And the mistake that a lot of people are making is sitting on their hands and doing nothing. Well, I think this is an ideal perfect storm almost for buyers and sellers, because if you're selling a property, you're generally looking at buying another home.
Correct.
Now, you link those two together, and this is an ideal time to take advantage of everyone else's fear to actually get into the market.
Because rarely are you buying, like first home buyers are an exception.
Sure.
Like they are buying without selling.
Yes.
People who are downsizing, a lot of the times are buying again.
They are.
As well as selling.
Yep. And
the only other time you really transact without doing one or the other is when you're going in Pine Box.
That's right.
So
that's exactly right.
Ultimately, most of the market will be buying and selling in the same market. So therefore, as long as they're organised and they've got professionals on their side, it should be a great time for them, which is why I hate the term buyer's market.
Yeah, no, this is where one of the things I tell everyone is stop listening to the news and stop buying the newspaper, because it'll scare you from doing anything.
Except if you're looking at marketing, mate.
Yeah, but we're doing it through other means, mate. So we're talking directly to the people who want to listen, and that's a big difference versus rubbing your nose in bad news, which is generally what you're doing. So for me, when we're going into an area where the mainstream media is talking gloom and doom, and most of it's Sydney focused, but it has this ripple effect. And unfortunately, the banks take a national approach to policy. One of the big changes that needs to occur is a regional approach to banking policy, because every state is in a very different stage in terms of what's happening with their property. We need to be moving to an exercise where people take notice of that and start looking at what the fundamentals are. Now, the fundamentals, I'd research, this is something I do a lot of reading on. What's happening to the property market in South Australia over the next 12 months to 3 years. Now,
so we're going to predict.
Well, I'm not going to. These aren't my predictions. These are qualified independent research houses who are way smarter than I am, who have got access to a lot more information, and let's go through them. So the QBE Housing Outlook, it's looking at the next 3 years, and I'm looking here at forward projecting research based on really strong research
you want to try
data.
and advise your investors where to buy and what to do.
And why. So if we look at that, the QBE Housing Outlook is projecting that Adelaide will have the strongest growth over the next 3 years at a bit over 12%. I then looked at the BIS Oxford Economics study that also does a 3-year projection. They are predicting if we look at nationally, we're around about third, so they're talking about 9% growth over the next 3-year horizon. We then plug that into Terry Ryder's price predicting index. And his most recent one is actually positioning Adelaide as number one in terms of its growth potential. Now, why are they saying that? The economic fundamentals are heading in the right direction. So we've been talking about the $90 billion that defence is happening out in Port Adelaide. The space agency that we've just secured, now they're talking 12 billion and something like 20,000 jobs over the next 10 years that will flow from that.
Not to mention the copper find that BHP just found.
Spot on. Now, and the resources sector has been quietly bubbling. It's not making news yet, but we've got a lot of clients in Roxby Downs, and we've been doing a lot of work with them because things are on the increase there. So
it's really interesting, isn't it? Because these are big businesses.
Massive.
And they're in the background going, this is a good time to build mines and build infrastructure and go and find new resources and invest in that side of their business.
Exactly.
So when the market is good, when when materials actually go through the roof, they've actually got things online ready to produce.
And it's no different. If I'm investing in property, I take exactly that same approach. So if the big boys are doing it, that's always a really solid indicator to me that I should be doing the same.
Yeah, exactly. So, when we're looking at upgrading our homes or investing or all those sorts of things, it is the time to get in now, because there's no point going in 2 years' time when the capital growth is already and everyone's out there positive about the market again, and you're competing with every Tom, Dick and Harry to buy houses at $50,000 or $100,000 more than they were at this time.
Spot on. Absolutely spot on. Yeah, I just think there's some really simple takeaways. I'm quietly bullish. Adelaide is a quiet achiever because it doesn't get the headlines that the eastern states does, but it quietly just bubbles along. And when we look at...
We're consistent.
Nice and consistent. And I'm a long-term investor, so I'm not investing for the next 12 months, I'm investing for the next 15 years. And if you look at what's happening over the next 15 years in the context of that, we're very well positioned.
Same as from my side, the investors I've made in South Australia, have they gone through the roof? No. Do I think they are going to be great long-term investments? Yes, because my view is 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And so just because I've held them for 8 to 10 years, we're not there yet.
No, and you don't go into an investment strategy for 15 years and then make a decision on your property in year 1, 2, 3 or 5. You just
we
don't
see that
do
all
it.
the time where we go, someone buys an investment property and year 3 they go, oh, I'm going to get married now, and oh, the missus is pregnant now, and so therefore we can't afford to have that anymore.
Yeah. A smart investor, though, will have factored that in. So the journey that if you come to me, I will say, okay, let's project out the next 15 years and let's input. I'm getting married here, I'm having kids here. What impact's that having on your hip pocket every week for the next 15 years? Because you can actually do that. And then you know before you go in how affordable this thing is, rather than blunder in, buy the property and then go, holy hell, it's costing me $300 or $400 a week, I can't afford this, let's get rid of it.
Yeah, the other thing that I see a lot as well from investors is they actually buy the right property, and then when you're talking about having the best team on your side, then they haven't thought about who they're going to use as a property manager, and they just go with the person they bought it off. And they have a horrible experience, and finding a tenant's hard, and it just becomes too hard, and they go, bugger it, we've had a really bad experience, or they've had to spend money and now the tank is empty and they've got nothing left to spend, and they offload it.
Or worse still, they try and manage it themselves. And get themselves into all. So the 70% of property owners still self-manage. The 30% that do will chase the cheapest property manager. And quite often the cheapest manager is cheap because they haven't been in the industry long, they're managing way too many properties than they can handle. They're not an investor themselves, so they don't understand the ins and outs of it. If you've got someone who is the reverse of those things, all they do is property management. They are an investor. They're managing a limited number of properties, so it's controllable. The person who has your highest value asset in their hands for the longest period of time is your property manager. So you get a really good one, the journey can be a dream. You get a bad one, it becomes a nightmare and an expensive one very quickly.
And obviously, a little bit of background information. You used to own a property management business.
As well. So I understand the importance. And the reason we got into that industry was because we knew that if we didn't get the property management right, then our likelihood of achieving the results we were after was slim.
They are. We see it all the time where a property manager maintains a relationship with the owner to the point where when they go to sell, they'll normally just ask the person who's been managing it if they've done a good job to sell it.
Spot on.
So
Spot on.
It happens. So.
They have the longest relationship with the property owner than anyone in the property team that we're talking about. So it's really fundamental to get an exceptional property manager. And it's someone who is dedicated to property management and has been in the industry a while. The average life of a property manager in South Australia is 6 months. So if you want a revolving door, you go to a cheap agent that has a property management thing that's a bit of a necessary evil on the side, that's under-resourced and under-systemised, then you're going to be one of the 50% of first-time investors who sell their property within the first 5 years because they haven't set it up right in the first place.
It's definitely one of the things that I get most fired up about making sure people make the right decision on that side. I've seen, in a really horrible way, it's really good for me in a lot of ways because it means that a lot of people sell their properties. But I just wish I'd rather them keep them because I'd like to see them invest in property well and for it to be rewarding and not at trial and tribulation.
Well, I often say from our business perspective, we turn one-time investors into multiple investors. And if we do that, and if that journey is a good one and each player in that team is really good, they're not only going to just do one, they're going to do 2, 3 and maybe 4, which means that from your perspective as a salesperson, there's an opportunity you there to be involved in that transaction. We're having this conversation every day. A lot of our existing clients who we've done a lot of work with over the years, I've had one, I only got off the phone to him yesterday, he said, I'm really frustrated, Bushy. And I said, why? And I said, well, I've been dealing with you guys for the last 10 years and the last 3 months, all I hear from you is, well, we're not sure. And I'll say, well, there's a good reason, mate, because what I tell you today may not be applicable tomorrow. So do you want me to bullshit to you and get you to make fairly sizable decisions on a maybe? Or do you want us to say, well, this is what you can do today, this is what we see coming, but we're not really sure yet because no one's telling us when it's going to occur. So we've got to go on worst case because if we go on the likely case, we might be wrong.
And The funny thing with that is, I find those people that are having those conversations where the brokers come back, not sure, it's because they're really highly leveraged.
Yes.
They are really close to their maximum.
They are.
So this is kind of where I'm kind of having chats to clients to go, what we have to do now is get you unleveraged. We have to get you with as much room as you possibly can have. So if we make that change, if you've got something that isn't working within your portfolio, it needs to go today. Because if you can get rid of that, get unleveraged and have a lot of room in your financial capabilities, then when that opportunity comes up to buy something that you never ever thought you could buy at the right price, you actually can.
Yeah, you can. And I'm having the same conversation. You're right. Underperforming assets. I'm normally not a big fan of selling, mate, but for the first time in the last 12 months, I've been saying this asset here, this is hamstringing you, this is stopping you from doing anything, it's not going anywhere, it's costing you money, it's not going to go up in value.
And there's actually, when you couple that with Onkaparinga Council as well, because of the change in zonings that's happened 12 months ago, there's some of those properties that were bought as long-term development properties that now aren't developable. And so those people, if they truly want to stay that course and that's their long-term goal, then they need to offload that. It's through no fault of their own, but that's the risk you take when you buy a property. But if your long-term goal is to develop and build wealth, then that needs to go because it's no longer. It's not because now you're trying to make a property fit to your strategy, not a strategy fit to your life.
Dead right.
And so to me, that's really dangerous. And the minute I see people going, we want to do this, and then all of a sudden they go out and look at property and go, oh no, we've got our eye on this now and we're going to do this. They kind of change halfway. And that to me becomes really dangerous with their strategy.
And all that says they actually don't have a strategy. I spent a massive amount of time before we even, the thing I said this to you, the property is the last thing we talk about with the clients. It's absolutely the last thing. Because I go right back to, well, how do you want to live? How much is enough to live the way you want to live? What nest egg do we need to create? And then trickle it back to today, what sort of property is going to help you to get there? And how many of these do you need to get there? And then we've got something that we can keep us on track. I've come up with the freedom numbers concept. It's a really simple thing I can take people through that gives them absolute clarity really quickly.
I've actually got to read your book too.
Yeah, it's all in there. It's all in there.
What's the book called again?
Freedom. I'll give you one now. I just want you to make a donation to the charity that we're donating all the proceeds to.
Okay.
Living it rough.
No, cool.
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.